Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to welcome Trisha here to present the retrospective on the 2022 Harbor Seal pupping season. I think it's a very exciting time to be in the reserve when you're watching the new life, and it's fascinating, and the science behind it is even more fascinating. But we're lucky to have our Point Lobos docents who keep a really close eye on the season, and we're going to learn a lot today. So I ask that everyone stay muted during the presentation portion, but we'll unmute after the presentation so that any questions, and just feel free to throw them in the chat if you want to keep track of your questions as we go through it, as Trisha goes through a program. So Trisha, I'll hand off to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Tracy. And thank you, Tracy, very much for inviting me to do this. It's very kind of you to give me this opportunity to talk about one of my very favorite subjects in the world, and that's harbor seals. So Tracy's very kindly offered to go through the slides for me. And so let's go on to the next slide, Tracy. So I'm just going to zoom through today's agenda after we've looked at this lovely photograph that Jacqueline Harmer took, which is quite delightful. I'm going to zoom through Harbor Seal Pupping 101. I'm sure many of you know all about it already, but I'll just zoom through that. I'll talk about what we do in PUP-WATCH, how many seals we have at the reserve, and how many pups we've had. We'll take a quick look at the season overview, the good and the bad, or the good and the not so good, I should say. I'd like to spend a little time comparing our rookeries with the rookeries in Pacific Grove. The new PUP-WATCH functions that we introduced in 2022, and the plans that we have for PUP-WATCH in 2023. And then we'll allow some time for questions if any of you would like to ask questions. So let's go on to the Harbor Seal Pupping 101, Tracy. Okay. So as you probably know, the harbor seals are one of our 3 resident marine mammals. The other 2, of course, are being the southern sea otters and the California sea lions. But in addition to the central coast of California, harbor seals are found on shorelines in temperate zones all across the northern hemisphere. And their birthing season depends on the climate of where they are. So for example, harbor seal pups born in Southern California arrive much earlier in the year than pups born up off the coast of Washington, for example. And here in Point Lobos, our pups arrive anytime from late March through early May, and the vast majority of them arrive in April. And a lot of people ask me, well, how long is the gestation period? And it's rather a strange answer, I think. And that is 9 to 11 months. And this is because, like other marine mammals, they have what's called delayed implantation. Harbor seals mate immediately after weaning, but the fertilized egg floats free for about 2 months before it actually implants in the uterine wall. And then and only then will the embryo start to develop. And the pup is born about 9 minutes later. So females typically birth on the same beach every year. Next slide, Tracy. There we go. And the birthing beaches are known as rookeries. Harbor seals may haul out on beaches and rocks all over the place, but they only have their babies at certain places, and those are called rookeries. So all rookeries are haul outs, but not all haul outs are rookeries. And we've got 4 rookeries at Point Lobos. And here's the map. We have Moss Cove, which is a delightful little rookery, if ever you go and have a look at that during pupping season. Whalers Cove, Bluefish Cove, which is quite a secluded rookery and therefore quite popular with the seals, because you really cannot see it if you're on the trail. And of course, our iconic China Cove, and that's where most of the mums have their pups. Next slide, Tracy. And pups imprint as soon as they're born. This is Paul Repp's photograph of mom and pup nose to nose. And this is their way of recognizing one another. So even if they're separated for a few seconds only, mum and pups will often touch noses just to check the identity of one another. It's very helpful on a crowded beach, or if there's lots of mum and pups in the water, they'll recognize each other this way. And if another pup comes up to a mum, she'll just drive him away if he doesn't smell like her baby. Harbor seal pups can swim at birth. They're not very strong swimmers though, so often you'll see the delightful sight of pups riding on their mums' backs. And they weigh about 20 pounds at birth. So next slide, Tracy. So these are a couple of Kim Aikman's photographs. She is the wonderful lady who's the leader of the PUP-WATCH at Baynet out there in Pacific Grove. And these are a couple of her seals at birth. You can see the pup, first of all, at birth, how tiny it is. The caption says today, but just a few weeks later, you can see how much bigger the pup has become. So the pups will double their weight typically during their nursing period, but mums only nurse their pups for about 4 weeks. Kim tells me the shortest nursing period that she's ever come across was only 2.5 weeks. The longest was 6 weeks. So I typically tell visitors that mums nurse their pups for 4 weeks. And as I said, they need to double their weight during that short nursing period. But the mother's milk has a very, very high fat content. It's about 50% fat compared to cow's milk, which is only about 3.5%. So the pups do gain weight very quickly. And do you want to go on to the next slide, Tracy, please? And you can see, look at this pup here. He's absolutely huge. And look at mom, she's tiny. So the pups will grow and grow and grow and get nice and fat. But during this time, mom will lose up to half her body weight. And at this point, after about 4 weeks, she needs to wean her pup so that she can go out into the ocean and feed and start replenishing her own body in preparation for the next pregnancy. Because as I think I just said, they do mate immediately after they've weaned their pup. So they really need to get started in fattening up their bodies for next year.
Yeah.
So now the weaned pup has to go and hunt and fish for himself. He has to learn how to do that. It's hard work. And the fat that he has stored during the nursing period is crucial to help him get through this challenging time after weaning. And even then, only about 50% of pups make it through to their first birthday. So this goes to show once again how crucially important the nursing period is. Let's go on to the next slide, Tracy. So I'm going to talk about PUP-WATCH, what it is, what we do, and why we do it. So basically, docents who are member of the PUP-WATCH team, they sign up for shifts armed with scopes and pelts sometimes and photographs. And their main role really is to educate visitors. People love to ask questions about harbor seals. And also to stress the importance of keeping quiet around the mums and pups so that the seals are not disturbed, they don't get scared and flee into the water, and the pups have as much chance to nurse as they possibly can. We also assist seals if they need help. Sometimes a seal needs to be rescued and we'll reach out to marine mammal rescue. Sometimes an animal will show up, let's say on a beach that's accessible to the public, like Gibson Beach or Western Beach, and we need to have the animal cordoned off just to keep people away from the animal. It might just be resting there. And we also do citizen science, which basically is counting seals. I have a few pup watchers who take wonderful photographs of seals and they send them to Kim Aikman, who's gradually putting together a catalog of seals. And we note any unusual trends, things that we have noticed that are happening that are rather unusual, and we need to keep an eye on what's going on. But basically those three elements, educating, assisting, citizen science, what is it really all about? It's about protection. We protect the animals because harbor seals have federal protection under the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972. So that's what PUP-WATCH is all about. Let's go on to the next slide, Tracy. A lot of people ask me, how many pups do we have this year? How does that compare to last year? How many seals are there in Point Lobos? And I have to say, it's quite difficult to get the exact numbers. We do pretty much count the rookeries every single day. We organize simultaneous all rookery counts at least a couple of times a year now. But you know, pups don't stay in one place. Seals come onto the beach, they go back into the water to go for a swim. Sometimes they'll go from one rookery to another. We might have pups going, let's say, from Moss Cove to Whalers Cove or Whalers Cove to Bluefish Cove. So it's quite difficult to really have an accurate count. But if we go on to the next slide, Tracy, let's have a look and see how this year compared to last year. We'll just go through this row by row. So last year, our first pup was born on March the 24th at China Cove. When I say first pup, I mean the first full-term pup. And this year it was March the 26th at Bluefish, so the date was more or less the same. Last year we didn't have any stillborn pups at all, and this year we did. We had 3 or 4 stillborn pups. One was found in Bluefish Cove with the poor mother grieving for that pup for quite some time. And we had 2 or even 3 at Whalers Cove. So we're not quite sure why we had more stillborn pups this year than last year. And this is the kind of trend that we do need to keep our eye on. Last year, we had 3 or 4 abandoned pups, 1 at Whalers and 2 or 3 at China Cove. Mums will abandon their pups for various reasons. Could be it's a major disturbance and the mother is just too afraid to come back up onto the beach. It could be a first-time mom who hasn't quite got the hang of things yet. She might abandon her pup. Or it could be a mother that's underweight. She's skinny, she just doesn't have the resources or the milk to look after her pups, and she'll abandon him. So last year we had 3 or 4 abandoned pups, and this year we had 1 abandoned pup in China Cove. We do try and rescue abandoned pups if we can, but we usually can't, simply because we can't go down into the rookeries, because then we would terrify all the other seals. So it's very painful to watch these little things starving. And so I was glad we only had 1 of those this year compared to the 3 or 4 of last year. Last year, our last pup was probably born in early May. I don't have an exact date. This year, I think he was born on around May the 7th. I've spotted a pup with his umbilical stump still attached on May the 12th. This was at Bluefish Cove. And typically the umbilical stump will hold on for, let's say, 5 to 7 days. So he was probably born around May 7th, so about the same as last year. Last year we considered the season over on June the 6th, and this year on June the 5th, so more or less the same time. Once we've seen that there's no more pups nursing, let's say for 2 or 3 days, that's when we call the season over. But here is the rather worrying difference. Last year we had 55 pups, and this year we only had 45 pups. So not quite sure why we have 10 fewer pups this year than last year. And again, this is a kind of a trend that we need to watch for. Tracy, go back to slide number 9, please. There you go. So in addition to counting pups, we count seals. NOAA will be organizing, I think, a seal count of the entire coastline of California. And of course, Point Lobos will be included in that. But for the meantime, we count how many seals we have altogether. We organized 2 all-rookery seal counts this year. The first one was about 10 days after the first pup was born. But we also include all the adults and the juveniles and the dads and everything. And the second one was organized 4 weeks later. And both counts were an absolute disaster. The first one, there was a very, very high surf day, and these huge waves were sort of washing over rocks where you typically find seals lounging at low tide. And we only found 44 seals in the entire reserve that day. And the second count on May the 4th, also at low tide in the morning. And the beaches were empty. All the seals had gone off shopping in Nordstrom's or something. They had just disappeared. They did come back later in the day. We did actually eventually count 77 seals that day. I don't know why they were messing with us that day. So I'm hoping our next seal count, we'll be counting them again pretty soon, because the seals are coming in for molting now, and we'll see how many seals we have in the reserve when we do that. Tracy, go to slide number 11, please. So I'd like to talk about the season as a whole this year, the good news and the not so good news. On the whole, I would say the season was pretty good, generally because our mums were so fat and our pups were so fat, I thought they were going to burst. And the fatter the seal, the better. As I said, the babies, and especially, they need that layer of fat to help them get through that challenging time after they've been weaned. I found the other good thing was that we only had one abandoned pup this year compared to the 3 or 4 last year. And we had no major disturbances, no horns blaring, no drones, no low-flying helicopters or aircraft, no visitors having wild parties right next to the rookeries. And talking about visitors, they were so much quieter this year. It was great. The message really seems to be getting through. You know, the parkades, they give the flyers to people as they're driving in. There were docents doing gate greet, and they were doing a great job explaining why it's so important to keep quiet. I think social media might have had something to do with it as well. People really seem to have understood how important it is to be quiet around the seals. Let's go on to the next slide. But the not so good, our pup numbers were down, as you saw, from 55 to 45 this year. We had those strange stillbirths in whalers. And actually, whalers was kind of weird this year. I'm sure you know all the beach, which is right opposite the whaler's cabin. Typically, that is a busy rookery right there, right by the cabin. It looks like this photograph, but that's how it should look. I think I took this photograph last year. Lots of pups and mums, and everyone looks happy and good. And this year, you know, the seals usually start coming in March, late March. By the end of March, they're having their babies. So normally we have seals on that overlook. Nobody in March. Nobody in the first few days in April. April the 6th, 2 stillbirths right there. And then in the middle of April, they started trickling in, and we had mums and pups on the beach. May the 3rd, they all disappeared, and the beach was completely empty for the rest of the season. And we just don't know why. Last year, it was pretty noisy there. They were building a new boathouse down in the parking lot, but the seals were there. This year, it was quiet, and the visitors were quiet. We did have seals at the other end of Whalers Cove, at the East Beach and by the Bloy Rocks there, but I don't know why that rookery was deserted this year. It was very strange. Let's go on to the next slide, Tracy. I'd like to talk a little bit about the situation in Point Lobos compared to the situation at the Hopkins Beach and the 5th Street Rookery out there in Pacific Grove. We had about 60 pregnancies at Point Lobos this year. Pacific Grove usually has far more seals than we do. They had 89 pregnancies, which is about 20% fewer apparently than they normally have. We had about 5 failures, and by that I mean stillborns and abandoned pups, miscarriages. They had 29 failures out of 89 pregnancies. Our failure rate was 8.3%. Anywhere between 5 and 10% apparently is more or less normal. 5% is pretty good. 10% is a bit sort of easing into the not so good territory. So we're kind of somewhere in that area. But 32.5% is horribly high. And the seals were very, very stressed out there this year. I'm sure many of you read in the newspapers about the very noisy roadworks that were going on along the wreck trail, or the road along the wreck trail at Pacific Grove. Baynet repeatedly made requests to the city council to stop the roadworks during the pupping season, but they didn't stop. Eventually, NOAA put pressure on the city council and enforced the stoppage, but not until April the 12th, by which point, of course, it was well into pupping season. And the results, we're pretty sure, we can't be 100% sure, of course, but we're pretty sure that this very high failure rate in Pacific Grove was due to all those noisy disturbances. Yet again, I can't stress enough how important it is to keep quiet around the seals during pupping season. Let's go on to the next slide, Tracy. So let's just talk about the new functions that we introduced in 2022. I felt it was very important to be able to communicate very clearly with Marine Mammal Rescue and California State Parks. You know, how would they like us to behave? What would they like us to do? And what their constraints were and how we could work together as teams. So we reached out to Marine Mammal Rescue and they were great. And they said, yes, call us whenever you think an animal needs help. We don't mind how many phone calls we get. Send us photographs, then the animal is on our radar. And if we can, we'll come and rescue. We also established a list of procedures as to, you know, what to do under certain scenarios. If an animal needs rescuing, if an animal shows up on a beach that's accessible to the public, who should do what, who should be called. Also, if we needed help from the park aides, from the California State Parks people, and everybody was very cooperative and very helpful. So we wrote up a protocol for each of these scenarios that was made available to all the pup watchers and is also in the entrance kiosk at Point Lobos. So the park aides know exactly what to do, who to call, and the procedure to follow for each scenario. So that worked out pretty well. Next slide, Tracy. Oops, that was a... Oh yes, that's right. This is the rescue. We managed to rescue this little guy last year. We called him Taipei. He showed up on the boat ramp all by himself. And yes, sadly, he didn't make it, but we were very glad that we were able to rescue him. And again, Marine Mammal Rescue were just absolutely fantastic. They really were. Next slide, Tracy. Also, the California State Parks, the senior park aides, requested that we had pup watchers enter the reserve before 8 o'clock every morning to go down and check the boat ramp at Whalers Cove before the divers arrived, because this character, Ramp Girl, we call her, this is her mugshot. She, in previous years, spent a lot of time on the ramp, and she even spent time on the ramp with her pup. And of course, while she's there, the divers can't use the ramp. So we had to check to see if she was there every day. If she was, then a ranger would have to come and encourage her to get back into the water. As it turned out, Ramp Girl was at Whalers Cove. She was swimming around the cove this year and in Bluefish Cove, but she didn't actually get up onto the ramp. But we were very happy to have the opportunity. And thank you to the senior park aides for encouraging us to go in and check the ramp. Also, California State Parks reached out to us because they wanted us on their Facebook page, which was lovely. And they did pup dates every week, just to inform the public of what was going on. And apparently visitors really liked that. So that was really great. And then next slide, Tracy. And then partway through the season, the docent council mentioned to me that all the other programs actually had a leader and a co-leader, and they suggested I select a co-leader to help me with the PUP-WATCH program. Many of my team members would have been absolutely fantastic, but eventually I reached out to Don Blahoviak and I asked him if he could help me. He's a wonderful docent. He's very active. He wears many hats and he's involved in all sorts of things at the reserve. And he has wonderful technical expertise, which is great because mine is abysmal. And fortunately, Don accepted and he agreed to take on this role. And I'm very grateful that he did. Let's go on to the next slide, Tracy. So our PUP-WATCH plans for 2023, we're going to go digital. We do have paper forms that, you know, pup watchers are supposed to fill out, counting seals, or if they note a birth, and then I rather laboriously put all the information into my computer. And many of the pup watchers have said, gosh, you know, wouldn't it be great if this could be on the website, or we could do this digitally? And of course, that is a great idea. And I had no idea how to do that. But Dawn now is diligently hard at work designing an easy, user-friendly form for pup watchers to be able to complete on their phones. So if all goes to plan, the observations will be recorded in real time, the data will be automatically collected and collated, and data analysis, rather than being terribly laborious, should be a piece of cake. And the plan is to have this form available in time for the 2023 pupping season. I hope it will be. No pressure, Dawn. So in future years, if people ask me about pupping and how many seals do we have and how many pups do we have this year and how does that compare to 2 years ago, we should be able to give an accurate response at the touch of a button. And that's it. So Tracy, I would be very, very happy to answer anybody's questions if you do have any questions for me today.
Wonderful. I'm going to stop the screen share and we can all come back and please, it's a great time for any questions. Trisha, thank you. That is amazing information.
You're welcome.
I'm really excited about the last part, the going digital. That is actually such an amazing step towards progress, and big shout out to Don, not only for that, but also for that beautiful slideshow we just saw. He was also responsible for putting that together for us today. So I really appreciate Don's efforts. He does a lot for us.
Yes, he does.
Very appreciative. So with that, does anyone have questions about any of the aspects of the season or that that Trisha presented? And I think we have one. Oh, Trisha, Jacqueline wants to know if you could say a few words about molt, about the molt.
Yes. You know, there is such a thing called a catastrophic molt, which I think is a very funny term. And that's basically, for example, the elephant seals, they will lose this year's coat all in one go, and then they wait on the beach while they grow their new fur. The harbor seals don't do that. They lose their fur in patches. And they're starting to do it now, and they typically come into the haul outs to do that. So they look a bit tatty. And interestingly, it's harder to see their spots while they're molting. I guess there's a layer of fur over their spots. They kind of turn a kind of a golden color, actually, or a tan color. And they just sort of wait while they molt. And that's why it's a good time to count seals, because they do come in for the molt. So I'm hoping that the next seal count we do will be less disastrous than the previous two that we did this year.
Thank you for that. Does anyone, are there any other? I have a quick question in between, while if there's anyone else who's thinking of putting one in. When you said that they can't rescue the abandoned pups, is there criteria that they can? What is, is there specific criteria?
Very much so. You know, harbor seals are very fast swimmers, but they're very clumsy on land. So if they feel threatened, they'll all make a beeline for the water because that's their safety zone. So let's say, for example, we have an abandoned pup on a rookery surrounded by many other seals. If we tried to go down and rescue that pup, we would really cause a lot of fear amongst all the seals on that beach or in that rookery, and they would all flee into the water. And we could cause other pups to be abandoned, because what happens is that the mama will go out, but she'll be too afraid to come back to look after her pup. So obviously we can't go down into a rookery and try and rescue an abandoned pup. Taipei, that little guy, he was on the Whalers Overlook beach or in the rookery for ages and ages and ages. And then one day he showed up all by himself on the boat ramp at Whalers Cove. And that's why we were able to get to him.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. So as long as the pup is away from a group.
All other seals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
then
was curious about that because I followed type A quite
Yes,
closely,
I know we all did.
as many did. So
Yes, yes, quite delightful as well. When Marine Mammal got him, we called him Type A because he was such a Type A little guy. And then when Marine Mammal got him and they asked us what his name was, and we said Type A, which they wrote like, the capital of Taiwan. So
right.
he got that name.
I
Yeah,
loved it. I know. I thought that was fantastic.
I thought that was quite amusing too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was. Yeah, it was very, very cute.
Yes, I
Definitely.
think when he died about 3 weeks later, and we were just devastated because we were all rooting for him.
Right. Yeah.
But apparently the little guy, he got a twisted gut, and they were unable to save him. I suppose he was so malnourished. His little system had been through so much, and it was probably weakened.
Sure. Yeah. But definitely got to that ramp, which was
Yes, I mean, I must admit, the day we got him, it was just absolutely
very
fantastic.
celebratory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the PUP data reported to a national program as well, so we can compare our percentages to other rookeries?
Not yet. Now, as I say, NOAA apparently did a kind of a statewide, when I say statewide, the entire coast of California. The last time they did that was in 2012. And now they are discussing doing another statewide count, in which case our statistics, of course, will be included. From what I understand, they're planning to do this with a flyover. This will be a plane taking lots and lots and lots of aerial photographs. And then also there'll be people on the ground, and then you'll kind of collate the information and put it all together. But in the meantime, we are just putting together this information simply because with climate change, there's an awful lot going on. And we feel that, part of citizen science really is just to observe and count and notice things. So that's what we're doing. Kim Aikman out there in Pacific Grove, she's just absolutely amazing. And year after year, she puts information together. She has a very, very thorough knowledge of the seals in her area. She almost recognizes each seal by its pattern of spots, which I haven't got to that point yet. But she is putting together a photographic seal catalog. So, for example, she's minus about 20% of her mums this year. Where did they go? We don't know. She's using Point Lobos as a kind of a control to see how our seals are doing compared to her seals. But she'll also come to Point Lobos to see if any of her seals show up at Point Lobos. They haven't, but where are they? And she would recognize them from their photographs and also from her own experience if they showed up at Stillwater Cove, for example, or something like that.
Yeah, I had wondered that actually. That answered another question I had. When do the majority of harbor seals, not moms and pups, go to sea to feed? Because usually they're seen sleeping on the beach during the day. And I think we're talking about in PG, and then sometimes gone in the afternoons at Hopkins Beach.
Oh, it's interesting you should say that, because I find that we have most of our seals around in the afternoon and not in the morning. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they're nocturnal animals, and so they feed at night. So that's, a lot of people think, oh, they're so lazy, they just lie around all day. Well, they saw us in our beds at night, they'd think we were lazy too. They're nocturnal animals, so they feed at nighttime. The mums hardly feed at all while they're nursing. That's another reason why we like them nice and fat before they start the nursing period. They will stay with their pups pretty much the whole time while they're nursing. If they're underweight, they will go out to feed from time to time. And I think towards the end of the nursing period, they'll start going out to feed for short periods and they'll come back. And during that time, that's when you hear the pups crying. Where's mom gone? But she's just gone out to start feeding. And then she will leave him. And it is quite dramatic. They do make a lot of noise sometimes when they're weaned. But as long as they're nice and fat, they should be okay.
Do you think this year some seals were deliberately deciding against giving birth because of ocean conditions or other human caused reasons?
I don't know, Tracy.
Yeah.
I really, really don't know.
Good question.
As I said, all one can do is observe, record, observe, record, observe, record. And I'm fairly new to this game. This is only my second year as the PUP-WATCH advocate, so I still have a lot of learning to do. As I say, I keep referring to Kim Aikman. I do get a lot of my knowledge from her, and I'm starting to read books all about harbor seals and everything. I mean, the situation at the whalers' rookery is really strange. And I just can't explain it. I really can't. Now, you know, if this hotel, as I'm sure you've heard, there are plans to build this big hotel at where the cannery is it the cannery? Or yeah, out there in Pacific Grove. That'll be a 2-year project if it goes ahead. Lots and lots of noise, digging down underground for the parking lot. And then even once the hotel's completed, there'll be a bar and a swimming pool up on the roof, so there'll be noise at night as well. And Kim thinks it's entirely possible that we'll lose the Hopkins rookery completely if this project goes through. She might be wrong, but she may well be right. But all we can do is just observe. And if they abandon the Hopkins rookery, where will they go? I said, come to Point Lobos.
It's protected and quiet.
Well, this is it. This is we realize how incredibly fortunate we are to have Point Lobos, because it is so protected and quiet, even with all the visitors we have, compared to, we don't have any traffic noise really, except at whalers a little bit. But the seals there are so much better off at Point Lobos compared to Pacific Grove.
Yeah, it is a point that that I've always tried to communicate to our members, that how important it is that Point Lobos is protected, and why it makes a difference that it's protected, because having, you know, for not just the mammals, but all of the creatures, all of the plant and life, it just makes a difference. So
it really does. Yeah.
Caitlin wants to know how many pups a mom will have in her lifetime. Is there like an average?
Lots actually. She'll start having her first pup when she's about 5 years old, and the females live until they're about 30 years old. And indeed, they can have pups every single year. Every now and again, they might skip a year. Let's say, for example, they'll have a pregnancy that fails, or they are underweight and they abandon their pup 1 year. They probably won't have a pup the following year. They'll skip a year, but then they may well have a pup again and start pupping every year after that. So they have plenty of pups.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that's a lot. But they only have one pup a year. They cannot feed twins. I don't think, I mean, you never say never. I don't think they ever have twins. If they did, either one pup would die or both pups would die, because they would not have enough milk to feed both pups. And this is why if an abandoned pup tries to get milk from another mom, she'll chase him away, because she needs to reserve that milk for her own pup, for that pup to survive.
And same mate throughout their lives, or do they change mates?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Harbor seals are very, very shy about this kind of thing. And elephant seals, for example, they will mate on the beaches, but harbor seals don't. They mate out in the water somewhere. And I believe I'm correct in saying, because I've heard this many times, no one has ever seen a harbor seal mating. So nobody knows who the dads are. And if you'll see males on the beaches, which you do, you'll find males on the rookeries, you don't know if it's the dad or not.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I respect that. Once nursing is done, do the moms and pups stay together for a bit until the pup is in?
No, they don't. They don't. That's it. Mom goes out and she mates right away. She comes into estrus as soon as she's weaned her baby. And she'll go out there and meet with some mystery male seal somewhere. But no, there's no relationship with their pups after that.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
4 weeks. That's it. Childhood is 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that was a great question, Jennifer. And the answer surprised me. I for some reason I thought that the group stays together. But
no, I know that moms like to come back to the same beach year after year to have their baby. And they'll even choose the same part of the same beach as their little spot. where they like to hang out with their pups. I don't believe the pups come back to the beaches they were born on. I could be wrong about that, but that there's no connection in any event between the mums and the pups after the pup is weaned.
They're completely independent after that.
Completely independent, that's correct.
Oh. Are there any other, I'm going to just check to see if I see any other questions. Any other ones before we wrap up? I wonder if, while I'm waiting, I wanted to let anyone who came in a little bit late, remember we're recording this, so I'll send this out and you can catch up. Anything that you missed, you can catch in the recording. So we do have one more question. Do the mums give birth on the same beaches?
Yes, they
Yeah.
do. Pretty much, yes, yes. And another question that people ask is, do the mums give birth in the water or on the land? And typically it's on land, unlike sea otters, for example, which will have their babies in the water. The harbor seals will have their babies on land, unless they can't get to the beach. That can happen. They'll be trying to get in. They want to come in and have birth and give birth, and for some reason they can't get to the beach. There could be something going on that beach. For some reason they're too afraid to come in, and they'll have their pups in the water, which is not ideal, but they do that sometimes.
And then how do they get the pups to the beach?
Well, pups can swim right away, remember?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I know it's very coveted. People will watch for the birth. And
I know. I've never seen one. I've spent so much time watching harbor seals, and I've never been lucky enough to see it. But it's one of these situations, you turn away for 5 minutes to talk with somebody, and then a seal has had her baby while you were looking away.
Wow, that's wonderful. How often is PUP-WATCH at the reserve?
Every day. I'm there pretty much every day during the pupping season. If I'm not there, I have somebody covering for me. And we have really quite a few people docents who are members of the PUP-WATCH team. So there is always someone there in the reserve. Not necessarily on a shift with sort of scopes and everything, but there's always someone there checking rookeries, checking the trails. And as I said, the early morning pup ramp check as well, that was done every single day by our pup watchers. A couple of people were just wonderful. They came in every day to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, and the rest of your team for that. It is a labor of love, I know, but definitely an effort that's made, and we really appreciate it. Because
I have to say it's pretty intense for at least 2 months. I would say from the middle of March until the middle of May, and then of course there's stuff before and after as well. But the rest of the year, it's much quieter, of course. So it's worth doing those few months intensely.
Well, we certainly thank you. Thank you so much. If anyone has questions that they didn't think of or that come up later, always feel free to shoot me an email. I will get it to Trisha and we'll get it answered for you. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, that we do record these events. So anyone you'd like to share this information with, please feel free. And we'll post it on our YouTube channel as well. So you can get that there. So with that, thank you, Trisha, so much. I really appreciate it. I just love this subject. And this is a whole new way to look at it, is in retrospect. And it's the first time we've done that. Normally, we have always talked about it as it's happening, just as a topic, but this is a wonderful, interesting way to look at it. And I love the science that's going into it, and the efforts to observe and document, because that's how we're going to learn and moving on.
Exactly right.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Really appreciate you being here. And as always, thank you for your support of the Point Lobos Foundation. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.